Have you ever noticed how your mind refuses to be quiet? Even when nothing is happening, when the room is still and the noise fades, something inside you keeps moving. Thoughts ripple beneath the surface, subtle, relentless, alive. You try to rest, to slow down, to simply exist, but your mind keeps returning to old moments, unfinished conversations, imagined futures. Silence doesn't bring peace. It only amplifies the noise within. You don't just think, you observe yourself thinking. You analyze the analysis. You step outside the moment to understand it while it's still happening. Others seem to move through life with ease. They laugh without dissecting the reason. They love without rehearsing the ending. You watch them and wonder what it must feel like to live without questioning every emotion, every glance, every pause. For you, nothing arrives unexamined. Meaning hides everywhere, and your mind feels responsible for uncovering it. You weren't always like this. There was a time when feelings arrived without explanation, when joy didn't require justification. But somewhere along the way, understanding became safer than feeling. Your mind learned to protect you by staying alert, scanning, predicting, interpreting. Psychology has a name for this: hypervigilance, the nervous system's response to a world that once felt unpredictable. When safety is uncertain, awareness becomes armor. So you learn to read rooms before entering them, to hear what wasn't said, to anticipate emotional shifts before they happened. Your mind sharpened itself not out of curiosity, but necessity. Thought became survival, but awareness comes with a cost. The more you analyze, the harder it becomes to remain inside life instead of observing it. Every emotion passes through filters. Every experience is examined instead of lived. You become both participant and witness, never fully surrendering to either role. Neuroscience calls this analysis paralysis, the moment when the mind generates so many possibilities that action freezes. You see patterns everywhere, in relationships, in behavior, in your own reactions. You recognize cycles others ignore. You notice the fragile structures holding people together, and yet, the more you see, the harder it becomes to belong. Understanding isolates. Empathy exhausts. Depth creates distance. You long for connection, but you overthink it until it dissolves. You crave closeness, yet prepare for loss before it arrives. There's a fine line between insight and obsession, and deep thinkers often walk it alone. This way of being doesn't appear suddenly. It begins quietly. A child sitting still while tension fills the room. Voices behind a door. A silence heavier than words. The child doesn't understand the conflict, but they feel it. The shifts in tone, the pauses, the unspoken weight. Before they learn the language of emotion, they learn to read it. They learn not to ask for too much, not to disrupt, to observe instead of express. Attachment theory explains this well. When emotional consistency is absent, the mind fills the gaps with vigilance. The child studies moods, behaviors, silences, not out of curiosity, but to stay safe. Overthinking is born not as intellect, but instinct. The brain becomes a radar. That child grows up, and the skill that once protected them becomes a burden they can't set down. As an adult, your mind is admired. People come to you for clarity, for perspective, for meaning. You can explain heartbreak. You can translate chaos into language. You can find logic in pain. But beneath that composure lives exhaustion. When someone hurts you, you don't explode. You analyze. You trace their behavior back to fear, to wounds, to history. You tell yourself you understand, and therefore shouldn't feel hurt. But the pain is still there, unacknowledged, unexpressed. Emotional intelligence becomes a shield. Empathy turns into avoidance. Understanding replaces vulnerability. Psychologists call this cognitive avoidance, staying safe by staying busy in the mind. Neuroscience shows that overthinkers often rely heavily on the brain's reasoning centers while emotional regulation lags behind. You think to survive, but in doing so, you forget how to feel freely. Knowledge doesn't bring peace when it replaces presence. You can understand love and still feel lonely. You can explain happiness and still not experience it. Your mind is brilliant, but it never rests. Neuroscientists describe a network in the brain called the default mode network, responsible for self-reflection, imagination, and meaning-making. For many people, it quiets when they rest. For you, it hums constantly. It revisits. It replays. It searches. Your thoughts aren't linear. They're interconnected, layered, woven together. One memory leads to 10 emotions. One moment branches into countless interpretations. This isn't chaos. It's complexity. And complexity is beautiful. It's the source of creativity, empathy, and insight. But it's also overstimulation. Your mind doesn't just experience the world, it absorbs it. Joy, sorrow, tension, beauty, all of it enters, all of it stays. Empathy becomes fatigue. Your nervous system reacts to emotional signals as if they're emergencies. You function, you smile, but internally you're always bracing, always alert, always slightly overwhelmed. This is what happens when consciousness stays awake too long. Yet beneath the exhaustion is something important. This depth doesn't come from emptiness. It comes from sensitivity, from a heart that never learned how to close. The problem was never thinking deeply. The problem was believing depth required suffering. Healing doesn't arrive through more analysis. It arrives through presence. Not every wound needs to be understood. Some need to be felt. Peace isn't the absence of thought. It's learning not to believe every one of them. Neuroplasticity shows us that the brain can change. The same circuits that once looped in fear can learn rest. Mindfulness doesn't silence the mind. It softens your relationship with it. You begin to return to the body, to breathe, to sensation. Sunlight through a window, the weight of a cup in your hand, the rhythm of your breath. Life happens here, not in explanation, but in experience. You stop trying to solve every silence. You stop interrogating every feeling. You ask a new question. Does this thought serve me? And slowly, the mind loosens its grip. You realize that depth was never meant to trap you. It was meant to guide you, until you remembered that awareness doesn't need control to exist. True wisdom isn't endless analysis. It's presence. The mind is a powerful tool, but peace lives beneath it, in the quiet space where thought appears and disappears. You were never meant to think your way into peace. You were meant to remember that you already belong to it.